Hello, and thanks so much for joining us today. My name is Ciara, and I'm the EDI Initiatives Associate at TCG. I'm a mixed Asian woman with shoulder-length brown hair and brown eyes, and I'm just here to say welcome to all of you on behalf of TCG and to go over a few quick housekeeping items. I'm calling in today from the lands of the Canarsie and Martinique, and I'd like to invite folks to place their own personal or organizational land acknowledgements in the chat. This session has captioning and ASL interpretation available, and we'll be dropping instructions for how to take advantage of those resources in the chat as well. If you're having Zoom trouble, please feel free to private message me. There might be opportunity for questions at the end of this conversation, so please use the Q&A box that's at the bottom of your screen in order to submit sessions. And now I'd like to invite Ciara Diane to please join me on video. Great, thank you. Take it away.
Awesome. Hello, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for this session. I'm Ciara Diane. My pronouns are she, her, or they, them interchangeably. And I'm currently calling in from the unceded lands of the Miami, Kasakaski, and Kickapoo peoples, otherwise known as Indianapolis, Indiana. Just to give you a quick visual description of myself, I am a Black person with a long twisted dark brown hair. I'm wearing a blue top with some kind of embellishments that are black and gold, and I'm sitting in front of a white kind of playroom type background. So I want to tee up this conversation with some just brief context. You may or may not be aware, but last year I had the absolute pleasure of being able to report on a multitude of call to action statements that were being pinned to university theater programs by BIPOC students and alumni. And I reported on this in American Theater Magazine last year. These carefully curated, well thought out statements discuss the racism at their university, cited personal experiences of racism by students, included a list of changes they wanted to see made, and just demanded a stop to the racism being perpetuated by their university theater programs. So today, during this roundtable, you will get to hear from several of those student and alumni organizers from across the country. And I want to lift in this moment that these are only a handful of statement organizers. There are more that have done them, and these organizers do not speak for all statement organizers, and they don't speak for all BIPOC students or alumni, nor should they have to, but they are the authorities on their own experiences. And what they've done is truly just courageous, incredible, and inspiring. And you're going to get to hear about their experiences, work, and hopes for the future during this roundtable. So without further ado, I want to go ahead and kick us off by having the panelists introduce themselves. We're going to start off with Bonita.
Hello, my name is Bonita Jackson Turner. My pronouns are she, her. I would like to acknowledge the land I'm zooming in from, and that is Muncie, Lenape, also known as Astoria, Queens. I'm a caramel-skinned Black woman with short Black natural hair and brown eyes. I'm wearing a red blazer and a forest green blouse underneath. My background is a white wall. I recently graduated from FSU Oslo Conservatory for Actor Training, where I obtained my master's in acting. And I would like to pass it off to Courtney.
Hello, I'm Courtney Rikki Green. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am zooming in from the Kickapoo land, or Chicago, Illinois. And I am an African-American woman. I am wearing a kind of burnt orange shirt right now, and I'm sitting on my yellow couch and my grayish background. I graduated from Syracuse University in 2018 with a BFA in acting. And I will pass it on to, who am I passing it on to? Francesca.
Hi, I'm Francesca Hsieh, and my pronouns are she, her, hers. I am zooming in from the unceded lands of the Natchez Kuso tribe, otherwise known as Charleston, South Carolina. I am a half Asian woman with short black hair. I'm wearing a blue and white striped tank top and gold hoop earrings, and I am currently sitting in a very standard looking hotel room. I am a recent graduate from the University of Utah, where I just got my BFA in musical theater. And then I will pass to Sabrina.
Hi, my name is Sabrina Lopez. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm calling in from the land of the Tongva Nation in Fullerton, California, Southern California. I am currently finishing my senior year in the BFA program at Cal State Fullerton. And I am a Latina woman with medium length brown hair. I'm wearing a black dress with flower prints, sitting on a velvet green couch with a white background.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you guys so much. And with that, we're going to go ahead and get started. First question that I'd love to hear from all of you about is what prompted you to create these statements to your university theater programs? And just what was that process like?
I can start. All right. So what prompted it was, so after the abominable murder of George Floyd, everyone was coming out of the woodwork with statements about being anti-racist. FSU Conservatory and Oslo rep were among them, and they made statements saying that they stand against racism. And myself and my entire student body said that that simply was not true. The entire student body was irate and outraged and wanted to seek action, but the current 5 Black students, myself, Nairi Poole, Nidira Adams, Dan Ajak, and Ta Garvin, felt that this movement needed to be Black-led by the Black student body. And so we mobilized, and we needed an argument for our call to action that was irrefutable. And that information came from purely looking at history. With the help of like our allies and all of us, we researched over 21 years of the Oslo Repertory Theater and the conservatory. We researched their theater seasons, the student demographics, staff and faculty demographics, and course curriculums. We also reached out to Black alumni from as far back as 1996 to learn about their experiences. And the data alone from 1999 to 2020, FSU Conservatory had produced 91 plays with no Black playwrights. The curriculum had 2 Black authors, and that was August Wilson and Susan Laurie Parks. The Black alumni accounted for 6% of the graduates, and the Oslo Repertory Theater had only produced 187 plays, but only 4 were by Black playwrights. And so with all of this data, we were like, you don't stand against racism, not really. And that was the backbone of our call to action, was something that could not be argued. And the rest was history.
Oh, thank you for sharing. My experience was similar to yours after the murder of George Floyd. The chair of our department at Cal State Fullerton released one of those Black Square posts on Facebook, just talking about standing against any racism, but never actually stating Black Lives Matter in that post. And it was completely performative. And they posted it one day, time went by, and then I thought, but that's not true. So I began commenting on their post asking, well, are you going to stand against the racism that exists amongst your faculty? And then a bunch of other students and alumni began to also kind of comment and call them out right on their Facebook. And that's when me and a group of students got together, and our first line of action was just to kind of hold an open forum for students and alumni to kind of just speak out. At my school, there really isn't that many persons of color in our department, but we held a meeting for us to speak about our experiences, and some white students came and also were there to listen. And from there, that really prompted us to actually get together and form an official club to really combat this. So again, it was born out of the Black Lives Matter movement. In the same ways, how dare a school try to make a claim over something that just isn't true. And I'm very proud of the students for speaking up and calling them out on that.
Yeah, so very similar to what Bonita and Sabrina have already said. At Syracuse, the drama department had released another, kind of general vague statement condemning racism, but not taking any accountability of any of the harm they had done to students. And me and other alumni had a very serious problem with it. And we made our own Facebook statuses about the racism we experienced within the department. And at the same time, and after we had released that, we were having conversations about ways we could make an impact and really make the university hear what we had to say and really fix their issues. So we started we read a statement from the Second City performers in Chicago, and the NYU Tisch school had also released a statement, and Juilliard had released a statement. So we modeled a lot of our structure and our language of our call to action from their documents. And we also just reached out to alumni and current students and had multiple conversations with them about their experiences with racism at Syracuse. And we collected testimonials and we collected signatures from melanin deficient students that still wanted to support us how they could. And we got a bunch of signatures, and then we released it. We sent it to the university, and then we had a combined effort of posting an abridged version of the statement on Instagram that started spreading like wildfire.
Similarly to Courtney, we were sort of inspired by a lot of the statements written by other programs, including the one from FSU. So it's very cool to be on this call with you right now, Bonita. But we, additionally, there was a letter from a bunch of artists in Utah to the Utah Shakespeare Festival that was released shortly after some of these statements in the We See White American Theater letter. And so our department had not issued a statement about Black Lives Matter or any of the things that were going on in our country. And so we organized a Zoom call with all of the current students of color in our department and as many alumni as we could sort of wrangle, and did a bunch of brainstorming. And then we created a social media account where we created places for people to share their stories anonymously of sort of experiences that they had during their time at the university or on campus in general, which we shared on Instagram and Facebook. And then we compiled and used those to inspire the letter that we wrote, which we did sort of group chats and Google Docs and things like that. And we then sent that out to the university and to different news outlets and social media and things like that.
Nice. And I think it's so cool, even kind of talking with some of you from my article and even now, to see how even though these statements were happening across the country in different places, you were taking inspiration from one another and kind of seeing one another, even though you were separated by location. And I'm curious, since then, after these letters and statements were released, what was kind of the general response that you received about them? And how did you move forward with your administration once you had released these statements?
So in our call to action, we had a lot of, we pulled some quotes from testimonials that disturbed some people after they had seen them. So it was interesting to get like the response of, wow, this is really messed up what you guys have been going through, which was validating and helps like empower us to keep getting the letter out there and to keep like pushing the university to do something about it and see how wrong their wrongs were. And sorry, I just lost my train of thought. We also just had a brain fart. So we released the statement, had the testimonials on there so the university would feel pushed into action. Oh, and then in our statement, we also gave the university only 72 hours to respond. Yeah, and so they did respond within 24 hours, and they were in full support of what we had released and what we said, and wanted to work with us to help us achieve our demands. And then it all kind of stalled from there, to be honest, because at the university level, we got a lot of excuses about why certain demands couldn't be met quickly and why certain things couldn't happen. And honestly, since then, it's just been a series of conversations over Zoom back and forth, pushing the people in charge to actively do more work.
Yeah, so with ours, after, all of us had been commenting on Facebook, the chair of our department had reached out to us to see if we had wanted to do a Zoom call with him. But we knew that this Zoom call would be talking about everything that's been happening. So first, me and four other students got together, formed the official union, and drafted a letter. And this first letter we wrote was actually just to the student body and alumni, to not only the students of color, but just anyone who has faced abuse in our theater program, because that's also a very real thing that existed as well. Just calling to students to say if anyone wanted to make a change, to voice their opinions, to come join us, or if they wanted to submit, a statement, because we were going to be having this meeting. And then when we actually got to the meeting with the chair of our department, the few of us that met with him shared our stories. We kind of had to relive our trauma for this person to understand what it is that we went through. And instead of being met with compassion, we were just given the runaround, told about the red tape that exists in universities, because we brought up the fact that why is our curriculum so focused on white American theater, and just told that we would have to go through the actual university and the provost and up the ladder, all the way to the Cal State system to get anything changed, asking about why we don't have mental health advocates, why we don't have more faculty of color, again, just met with, oh, well, you have to jump through this hoop and this. And it was a lot of that. So after that meeting, we got together and gathered just statements from other students who didn't want to be a part of our, didn't feel comfortable being part of an actual union. And we wrote a list of demands that were also based in the white American theater, their first list of demands as well, and sent that in. And we were promised that they were going to be taken care of or looked at least. But similarly to you, Courtney, it's just not a lot has really happened. The most that the change that's happened this whole year has been solely through the students, really. So as far as, the administration really teaming up with us, it's been a lot of empty promises, but, the students are still there pushing. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Francesca.
Yeah, I was just so after we released our statement, similarly to kind of everyone, we had a lot of Zoom calls with professors who reached out individually. I believe there was 4 of those throughout the course of August that were we basically talked more about our grievances and the problems we had and things discrimination that we had faced, and then also potential solutions and changes and things we would like to see in the curriculum and in the structure of the department. That work, like a lot of people's work, kind of petered out as we got into the fall. Schedules got busier, and also after our 4th meeting, we decided that we weren't going to have any more meetings with professors unless we had a facilitator present because of the emotional labor that was involved, and they were just becoming so taxing that they were no longer productive. And so then we didn't have any meetings after that request was made at the university. Towards the end of the fall, I sent another email asking if some of the promises that had been made in those meetings, asking for progress, what had happened with those. We got another email back sort of about that progress. We had a couple more meetings in December. And then the department created a Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee, which is a few students, professors, faculty, staff, etc. So that has been where the bulk of the work has been happening since then.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you all advocated like that to not be in a space alone. And I resonate with that because a part of some of the qualifying factors that I've dubbed us the Black Five, the 5 Black students who did the call to action. The only way we would enter a space with administration was with someone from FSU, Florida State University, with allies present. And these were our non-negotiables, and it was for safety, which some people may not understand. But the way my program has operated over X amount of years has been, we deal with things behind closed doors. We will handle this. And we are a conservatory that's based in Sarasota, but we are Florida State University students. And so when the call to action came out, to go back to Ciara's question, the response was, it was like an atomic bomb exploded in Sarasota. An atomic bomb of melanin had rushed through the Sarasota streets, claiming that we have been wronged. And a lot of the white community was not ready. However, we got immense support from artists who had worked for the theater, alumni from years all signed our letter. We had over 270 signatories, and a lot of them were alumni. A lot of them were people who were writing to me saying, I went through this, I went through that, this person did this to me. And it solidified for us the need and necessity, and how a long time coming that it was that this happened. So we were met with a lot of love and support, and we were also met with a lot of anger, a lot of confusion. We have a sponsorship program, a part of the program, which is a way for the theater and the conservatory to pay certain dues and fees. And it has never been looked at, and a lot of the sponsors left the program after reading our letter. So it was a mixed bag.
Definitely. And I know, and I hear as you guys are talking how hard it can be to speak truth to power. And I want to hear a little bit more with that about, were there any changes that you've already seen or experienced at your university since the release of the statement? Or if not, what are some of these changes that you still hope to see being made?
So I have seen a change in how the faculty communicates with the students. When I was a student, it was similar to like what Bonita said. It was all, behind closed doors. You didn't get a lot of in-person direct confrontation and direct conversations that were in a more open setting about what any issues you were dealing with. And now the students all will like gather together and have meetings on Zoom or wherever they do on campus. I don't know, have meetings together and talk to the faculty directly about their issues. Like they have a student liaison also present to help discuss any concerns. There is a faculty member that is in charge of specific like student issues now, especially in regards to like racial bias and any kind of abuse that's happening. They seem to have much more care about that right now. They also have addressed some of our demands and achieved some of them. They got rid of colorblind casting, and now all seniors are allowed in the showcase instead of having to audition for it as they had to before. And we just got our apology today that, yeah, it was like our first demand that we had been asking them for. We released our call to action on June 15th of last year, and we just got our apology today. Yeah, we also were able to get this university to seriously investigate a professor who had incited a bunch of harm on students and liked to say the N-word a lot. And we got her investigated and like put on leave, thankfully. But beyond that, there has been still some kind of like pushback from some faculty members about how much work they are willing to do for the students.
Yeah, thank you. I think so for us, a big change again comes from the students. So the union that we formed, we named it the the Theater Artists Union for Student Equity and Diversity, or TOS for short. It's one of the ones that I and a few other students founded, and we really came together to form as just sort of a liaison for students to come when they're experiencing harm or they need to speak through something and they want help, to come through us so that we can help facilitate it with the higher ups, with our chair or professor. Our group's biggest thing was to break that behind closed doors idea that a lot of us have experienced clearly. So we got information on how to contact the Title IX office, how to contact HRDI in human resources. We made sure to really find out what are the steps to take for students to do when they're experiencing harm in a classroom. So we were able to kind of break that down and try to translate it to students, trying again to facilitate open meetings between students and facilitators and professors. And our thing was to really bring in alumni or other artists of color to come and help our students, which we have, thankfully. We've had a lot of, they're trying to start mentorships. So that change has really come from the students. The chair of our department started a diversity club between students, faculty, and staff, which I was made the co-chair of along with another faculty and staff member. And that was really to start to look at policy changes, changes to our audition forms, which had a lot of problematic things on them. However, even the few staff and faculty members that are on there have gotten pushback from the rest of them. So change on that end has been really, really stalled. Even though it was prompted by the chair, it's not really gone anywhere per se, but they are working, they are pushing. We still haven't gotten like a statement of diversity yet from our chair, but like I said, at least on the students' end, they also are forming, Instagram so they can promote each other's work and again, just offer more virtual workshops right now. So I would say that's the biggest change, is the students are really stepping up and taking power and making change happen where we're not getting it. And I'm also noticing, again, more students are being comfortable speaking up directly to the professor who is maybe causing harm or using abusive tactics. The students are straight up telling them to their faces, and that's something that we didn't see before because there's so much fear that exists in my department standing up to certain people. That's just what we're taught, is if you're scared, you just don't say anything. And now, because of everything that's happened the last year, the work that I think they've seen that we've brought, students are becoming more empowered. And I think that's the biggest change.
Yeah, I would second that. I think concrete changes, we had that new Justice, Equity, Diversity, Inclusion Committee for the department. And then the department also in the fall established an endowed scholarship, which I'm going to read the quote from the website, is to benefit students from traditionally underrepresented communities who have demonstrated a commitment to increasing representation in the theater arts, and raised $17,614 through crowdfunding for that scholarship. So that's something we're very proud of, that shift has happened, because that was something in our demands. And then also, like Sabrina said, I think there's been sort of a cultural shift that's been slowly happening with the students, where there's been more of a demand for accountability from students to professors, which just wasn't there before. We had some incidents in this past semester, as I'm sure lots of places have, because one statement is not going to end all of the systemic problems that exist out there. But when those happened, we had students, not just students of color, white students, speaking up and writing their own emails and talking to the chair of the department and, you know, making posts and going to the public and all of these things, which people were too afraid to do before. And because there is this greater layer of scrutiny, I think there has been more change. It's created a lot more strife, I think, within the department, but I'm hopeful that that's like leading towards better things. I think a big change that we kept running into is that whenever a lot of the demands, we were told, like, for example, we wanted more writers of color represented in our season, and we were told that because our student body is not very diverse at all. I was the only student of color who graduated in the Department of Theater this past year, that wasn't possible because there wasn't students to fill those roles. There wasn't anyone to do those things. And because that has been the excuse a lot of times when we come up with a lot of the change, that's something that I hope that will be something that people are going to keep fighting to change, that we're going to keep seeing more students coming. But the only way that we can get more students to come is if there's an environment where they actually can be safe and supportive, and I can tell students of color that they can come and will be cared for. So that's a change that I hope, with the cultural shift that's starting to happen in the student body, that maybe that's a change that we can see down the line, but it's one that's going to take some time.
Yeah, absolutely. I hear you, Francesca and Sabrina and Courtney. I think that a lot of these programs operate on manipulation, intimidation, and on the grounds of we have no money, or this is the way it's always been. And I think that students aren't settling for that anymore. And I like hearing that a lot of students are now feeling empowered, and to know that we have always had power, but it's been hid behind all of these scare tactics as students. I think for FSU Oslo, the reason why I think we have had some strides throughout this year has been because Florida State University's administration has been a constant presence. They actually have been a crucial element to the progress that we have seen happen. And though we have a long way to go, don't get me wrong, a long way to go. I do want to say a name specifically: Dean James Frazier, who is the Dean of the Florida State University College of Fine Arts, Brad Brock, who is the Director of the School of Theater, have come in and have been advocates for us. And I think without this institution, you know, we're talking institutions and all this systemic racism, but without these people who are players to make this change, I don't feel that the program, the conservatory, or also repertory theater would have made the changes that have happened. And some of those changes that we had our first play written by a Black playwright this fall. It only took X amount of years, but they did Twilight Los Angeles by Anna Deavere Smith. We've had EDI trainings for staff, faculty, students. There have been anti-racist plans that have been discussed or are currently in a state of draft, or what they call fluid documents. What I wanted to kind of mention with what Sabrina was saying with, you know, the work that is put on us, they at one point kind of expected us to write this anti-racist plan. At some points, they expected us to alleviate them from any type of responsibility to craft this thing, and not taking into account all the work that we have already put in and the work that we are still doing. And to that, I say, that is not our job to do that. We have already overextended ourselves in a way that we shouldn't have had to do if we were living in a place and in a world where there was justice and equality and inclusion and diversity, but that's not the case. But that's all to say that there are anti-racist plans that are fluid right now. There are living documents, but nothing has really been solidified for the conservatory or Oslo Repertory Theater.
Yes, absolutely. And hearing you even just name the fact that that is a lot of labor on you, and several of you at the time of writing the statements were students. And if you weren't students, you were alumni, recent alumni, and you had other jobs. And none of you guys went into school to necessarily do this work, to do this. You were theater students. You were hoping to study theater. And naming that that is a lot of emotional labor to put on y'all. So I want to hear a little bit about, on a more personal note, what the effects were that this statement release and process had on each of you as organizers and as people.
Yeah, I mean, going off of what Bonita said, they really expected us to do the work. And that's why, you know, the theme of, I feel like what I'm saying is the work comes from the students, and that's still the case. You know, they would come to us and say, well, what do you want? Can you make videos on what you need, or come up with they really wanted us to come up with like tutorial videos on, you know, where students can go and find out all this information. I'm like, I'm still a student. I want that information too. And the toll, again, having to meet with your professors and again relive your trauma just for them to understand what they've done to you and to students in the past. We had to do that over and over. You know, again, there was very few students in these unions, and I was sort of the one that was at the forefront. So, you know, the fall semester, anytime, you know, a professor said anything that something bad happened, something racist was said, I was the one that would get the phone calls and the emails. There was times where I couldn't finish like an at-home workout because I'd get a notification and I'd have to handle everything. And me and a couple other few students, I ended up doing pretty poorly in a few classes because this took up so much of my time and effort. Because if we didn't do it, the work wasn't going to get done. To have to sit there and convince tenured professors who have been working in theater for decades that what they've been doing has been harming you, when these people don't take you seriously. You know, it took a huge emotional toll, and it still does to this day. Because in my case, being made the chair of their new, you know, representation inclusion committee, but still not seeing the changes that I needed, made me feel like they were just using my ethnicity and my face to say, we have a woman of color who's a student who's gonna be in charge of everything, but yet we're not gonna listen to her demands. That's really, and it's still really hard. So for me personally, I had to take a step back from both the student union that I created and the one that they put me in charge of with the other faculty and staff members, because for my mental health, I could not let my education suffer anymore for the sake of their learning. Because it hurt too much to be told that we're, you know, essentially, you know, you're just our prized brown person who's gonna make us look good. That was really painful, and it still is. So I also believe in self-preservation in an institution that is not helping you is an act of defiance on its own. But I take comfort that the new students, you know, the underclassmen who are rising up and taking my place as president and as founder, they're still doing the work. And I think that as much pain as this institution has caused me, I have faith that things are going to change because of them. And I still believe they need to take care of themselves too, as we all do.
Similar to Sabrina, I took on a lot of the burden of this work because it was personal and it felt important to me. But then it like went from, you know, typing up documents and finding the right words and everything and communicating with people to like the document was released and it felt like, okay, I'm done. And then came like the onslaught of like emails and students like, you know, contacting me on Instagram and on Facebook and in my email daily of like, you know, things they had endured, and finally having someone they could talk to about it that they knew would actually listen and try and do something about it. And it did really take a toll on my mental health. I lost so much sleep. And, you know, it became a second job that I didn't sign up for. You know, I had to put aside a lot of my own passions to really focus on this because it was constant for about 2 or 3 months, I think, yeah, of just, it never ended. And I was tired all the time. And it was like, I should be getting paid for this. It was also very hurtful to sit in like Zoom meetings, listening to faculty members, people with, master's degrees, telling me that they didn't understand how to empathize with their Black students. And just thinking, you all have been studying theater and studying acting and studying empathy for so long that it shouldn't be that hard. We shouldn't have to explain to you that your Black students are hurting right now, that when you say certain things to them, it's offensive. And it was exhausting. It was emotional. And I had to take a step back as well to heal and to just kind of really not think about it for a little bit, because it was a lot.
Yeah, definitely a full-time job completely. It consumed every day. And like you, Courtney, when we sent that call to action letter, I said, all right, did that. And then not 2 seconds later, inbox was full, DMs were full. I was getting calls, and, it's one thing to, feel the calling to do this work, and which I commend every person in this Zoom room right now who is doing this work and who's on this panel with me. But, you're not only experiencing your own emotional state with what you have gone through with the program, and then wanting to be there for others. And so I was taking all of these calls and, documenting these calls and listening to stories that were super traumatic, and not having, I had no space. I had no space in my body for myself, much less all of these stories, and wanting to make sure that they were heard. It was tiring. I was exhausted. It was not only just a pandemic, but I was working like full time and with this work, and wanting to be a newlywed, because I had recently gotten married to my husband, and here I am, trying to navigate this movement, and not wanting to be selfish and wanting to stay true to that movement. I can't even express it to anyone who has not been through it, what the toll is. It is almost unbearable sometimes.
I remember right before we released our statement, I met with a professor who had just recently, a couple years ago, left our university for racism incidents. And she wanted to express her support to us for what we were doing and sign our statement. And she was like, you're going to, this is going to be a fight, and you have to be ready for it. And I was like, yeah, I understand that, sure. And then I think, like everyone has expressed, we released that statement, and then the emails came and the meetings happened, and I was like, okay, this is a little bit more of a fight than I thought it was going to be. And then the semester continued, and things would happen, and I would get all those phone calls, like Sabrina said. Someone would call me and say, did you hear what this professor said in this class, or did you hear about this whitewashing that happened in this casting, or did you hear about whatever? And I would get calls, and people would be crying, or people would be angry, and I'd be like, okay, so this is a very different fight than I thought that it was going to be. And I think it's sort of that expectation of, you think, okay, I'm going to go in and I'm going to tell everyone my demands, and I'm going to be mad, and I'm going to say defend my rights and all this stuff, and that's going to be the fight. But the fight is really being able to sort of maintain that, like, I have to have boundaries, I have to take care of myself, I have to take care of my people who I am doing this for, because if we're not here, then it's not worth it, it's not happening. And it was really hard, as everyone has expressed, and everyone will continue to express, is that it's really, really hard. And I also had to, I ended up having to kind of drop our senior show class and do like an independent study thing instead, because I was just so depleted and so upset and afraid and all of the things and all the emotions. And so it's been very difficult and a lot of burnout, but it has also taught me a great lesson of, when you need to take care of yourself and put yourself first, and how much that is integral in this work. I think that, I I wasn't prepared for what it was going to be, but I don't think anyone ever can be. So I think that it it has been very challenging, but it has, I mean, I think totally changed who I am, the process, and who I will be from here on out.
I just wanted to say one more thing. Sorry. I was fortunate enough to be unemployed while I was doing this. So I could like pour a lot of my own time into this. And I really commend you all for doing this while you were students, because every single time I would get up at whatever hour of the day to like do this, I would always think, I cannot imagine doing this and also being in school at the same time, because it would just be too much. So truly, round of applause. And I commend you for navigating this while also being students at the same time, because I was so happy to be an alumni to take it on so that I could take some of that work off of the current students, because it is so much. It's so much.
Absolutely, absolutely. And even just naming that, even with that, and like you mentioned earlier, Courtney, you guys were not being paid for this. So as you were taking on this labor, even as you were unemployed, you were not getting paid for what was essentially a job that you were doing, for all of this work and this labor that you were and have been doing. And it's incredible. It is what you guys have done and been doing and continue to do and hold. And I want to hear a little bit about just what are some of the ways that theater professionals now that are in the field. I know some folks in this chat that are theater professionals. Me, myself, I'm only a couple years out of being in school, but wanting to know, what can those that are in the field do to continue to support theater students that are organizing in these efforts, as well as just BIPOC theater students in general?
I think continuing to a lot of some of the questions that I was getting from students who are under me, or classes that are below me who are coming in, have been, well, Bonita, what can we do now? You're leaving. Another person, Nairi Poole, has left as well. And it's really, we have set the groundwork. And I think now it's not just the responsibility of the theater, but the community to continue to hold these institutions accountable. It's continuing to call out the wrongs, the racism, anything that is seen. It is continuing to not just be bystanders. And honestly, it's not being afraid to move a person who's in power out and get someone who is actually wanting to be about the change and be about making a space that is equitable and diverse and inclusive, putting them in those positions. It's about not having faculty members say that we can't do this show because we don't have an ensemble that's diverse. Well, find someone who can fix that. So it's about moving people out of leadership who shouldn't be there. And it's about accountability, and that includes our white allies and not just BIPOC folks. And that's what I strongly feel.
Yes, everything Bonita said. Yes. And I just always encourage people to listen to the students more, listen to what they have to say. When we released our call to action, it was a year after the current Black students had released their own letter to the university that just went totally unnoticed, totally unheard, totally unacknowledged. And just listen to the students. When I was a student, I mean, as we've said before, the faculty student relationship is it's a very scary line to cross sometimes when it comes to conflict, and to not be afraid to cross that line and to confront faculty, or to really share your experiences with someone else and figure out a way to do something about it. Reach out to alumni, talk to people more. Yeah.
I believe we truly need more BIPOC staff and faculty members. I just think that's going to make a world of difference. So any openings you hear at any university, any institution to please help, our BIPOC professionals get work in teaching students, because, BIPOC instructors don't just have to teach other BIPOC students. They are more than capable of teaching anyone. But I truly believe getting them in these positions and higher positions is what's really going to make the difference. I believe in even, again, providing more mentorship programs for, students of color if we're not able to hire them on as actual faculty and staff. I really believe just the more that we can help bring these students up, providing more opportunities for them, like our white peers have had for years and years and years, it's really about that. I truly believe from a student's perspective, we need more people who we can relate to, who have shared experiences to look up to. I truly believe that's where the change is going to come from.
Yeah, I think modeling alternatives, I feel like part of what's so hard is when you're in sort of like a conservatory program. Like, I know that was exposed to sort of one structure, one way of creating theater, of doing the work, of being a professional, which isn't the only way, but because you don't have access to it, it's hard to imagine another path, and it becomes very hard to sort of rise up against the system or to do anything else, because you think that the only choice is to do this thing that you love, or to do it in a way that you maybe hate, or to not do it at all. And that's kind of not what it is, but feels that way, especially inside of the system. And I think also there is sort of this huge career safety, job security fear of, like, if I speak up and I say that I have rights, then maybe I'm never going to work in this industry. Maybe that's it. That's blacklisted me. I'm never going to have anything. And I think while we were doing it, I know that there were so many difficult moments where, we would get support from artists of color in our community in Salt Lake City, or from beyond in like the Theater Folks of Color Facebook group and things like that, where having that little bit of encouragement was enough reminder that, okay, when I graduate, even if maybe this isn't my community, that doesn't mean I'm not going to have a community. I'm not going to be like alone and isolated forever. And I think it's really hard to remember that when you're on the inside and you're doing that kind of advocacy. So from the outside, if you can make sure that your work is available and accessible, and that these students know that they have support from professionals, they have support from someone else, it makes it easier to keep fighting, or to keep working, to keep advocating, because you know that there's going to be a future. It doesn't feel like it's going to just end if you go too far or whatever.
Amazing. And noting on time, you only have about 5 or 6 minutes left, but I do want to hit on at least one of the questions that was kind of lifted in the chat. And someone was asking a little bit more about what are some of the action items that you asked your departments, in addition to some of the ones you already mentioned. And I think that can provide some clarity too, and touch on some of the other questions in the chat in terms of changes and what was asked for and what you guys are looking for.
Yeah, I mean, for our call to action, we had about 12 points, and the first one was admitting complicity. You can't move forward unless you know what you're moving forward with. And so we also were asking for having required texts for faculty and staff to read, such as, how to be anti-racist, actively recruit Black and other students of color to the program, hire people of color who's leading the charge, but also leadership. We asked for BIPOC voices to be included in the curriculum. As I said at the start of this, we only had 2 Black authors in the entire curriculum across the entire program, which was insane to us. We wanted them to commit to producing plays by Black playwrights. We wanted them to commit to color conscious casting instead of color blind casting. We wanted them to restructure this student sponsor program that they've had. We wanted them to hire a multicultural and diversity liaison, and to take it a step further, to donate to organizations who are fighting against racism. So those are some of the things.
One of the things that we demanded too was more student involvement. So specifically on we have a jury process for our BFA program, so for more students to be included on there. And so far we do actually have students now on the play selection committee that get to vote on the plays that we do for this season. A lot of our things had to do with selecting the season, having dramaturgs, especially if doing plays concerning people of color from a different culture, that too, and also scheduling rehearsals around all religious holidays instead of just Christian holidays. That was another action item that we made sure got in there. I don't know if that's been applied yet, but I think for us overall, it was just more inclusivity beyond just accommodating white Christian actors. That was something that we made sure got to them.
I can drop the link for our document in the chat if that's okay. But some of our main ones were, let me drop it right now. We wanted more transparency. We wanted a scholarship for BIPOC students and a hairdresser and a makeup artist in the costume department that could actually do not white people hair, and more faculty of color on staff as well.
I think most of our action items were really similar to everybody else's listed. I think another thing we put on was returning agency in terms of like selection within voice lessons and scene work and things like that to BIPOC students, where you weren't being forced into doing a role because of your ethnicity or your family background, but that you were asked if that was something you wanted to explore in that class, was a big thing that we brought up. Color conscious casting, sort of a condemning of whitewashing very specifically within that. Additionally, recruiting more BIPOC students, more BIPOC educators, and then also streamlining and making more transparent the method to report discriminatory behavior, since that's often very convoluted.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you guys so much for sharing those items. Additionally, I'm also going to link in the chat the link to the original article, and that has at the bottom, if you scroll down, that has links to a lot of these statements from multiple schools. And I encourage you, if you are more interested in that, to take a look at those links and read through all of those demand letters and statements that these students and alumni organizers had for their universities. And wrapping up at just about time, but before we go, I really want y'all to show some love to all of these panelists, these wonderful organizers. They have done so much. They are so brilliant. They are doing the thing. They are amazing, not just organizers, but theater makers too. So we uplift you and we hold you and we support you. And I can encourage everyone who is here and in this chat to continue to support and hold universities accountable. Many of you have gone to university theater programs. Look to your past theater programs and continue to hold them accountable. And thank you all so much for everything that you shared today and everything that you are. I'm going to pass it over to Ciara to close us out.
Hi, sorry, my computer's being a little slow. Thank you everyone so much. We encourage you to keep the conversation going on Mighty Networks. In the chat, I'm going to drop a link to a feedback form where we encourage you to tell us what you thought of the session. Your feedback helps TCG program our events, so please take a moment to fill this out if you can. Also, another quick plug in honor of TCG's 60th anniversary, where you're invited to join us as we celebrate the theater field's legacy and future at the Our Stories Gala next Tuesday, May 18th. Your pay what you will ticket purchase supports vital TCG programs and services for the theater field. So that link is also being dropped in the chats. And in closing, thank you again, and thank you to our incredible ASL interpreters for joining us today. And thank you, panelists, for your time and brilliance. See you all soon.